Why I consider myself to be Cornish. Fatlaganess! That's how you say how are you or hello in Cornish or Cernuic. And before we start, if you consider yourself Cornish, you should learn its language. But more about why directly. Now, this was a very difficult video to make because it is deeply personal to me, and I am trying to find the balance of my spirit using a little logic. Still, I hope there may be someone out there who finds themselves in a similar dilemma as I did, and this video may be of some little help to them. So why do I consider myself to be Cornish? Here is the basic answer. I consider myself to be Cornish because I was born in Cornwall, and I have spent the vast majority of my life within its borders, although I know for some reason I don't sound Cornish at all. I have been surrounded by Cornish men and women that entire time and have become deeply ingratiated into the culture, especially having had exposure to the older generations in my youth. But I have come to realise this is only a small piece of the puzzle. So, to further dissect this idea. In my experience, the Cornish are largely a peaceful, laid-back and friendly people who occupy a unique piece of the British Isles. It is probably through this endearing good nature that the culture is easily suppressed by outside influences, but I have found that even over vast swathes of time, it is nigh on impossible to kill kindness. When I was a brash and very arrogant teenager, I found myself to naturally gravitate towards being extremely proud to be Cornish, and would betray it, often in jest but not always, as a mark of superiority to others. Later in my life, as my horizons expanded beyond the end of my nose, I realised this was utterly stupid, for as nice of a fantasy as that was, the truth is that no one is better than anyone else because they hail from a different piece of land or culture. It is effort, perseverance and actions that determine the worth of an individual, not a birthright. After reading a good deal of world history and starting to understand the reoccurring problems of humanity, I then swung back the other way and viewed a national identity as something that was completely evil, totally at odds with logic, and something that made people dislike or hate each other for no other reason other than their nationality. Now, nationality is a tricky beast, for it is often compromised and comprised of principles. Sometimes these principles are manufactured by its rulers, but more often than not they are inherited through its traditions. And when those principles disagree with that of another established nationality, it will inevitably lead to physical conflict. Physical conflict is not a good thing for anybody decent, and least of all for the average citizen who fights and dies in those conflicts. However, since I have become a father, I find myself realising that I am not totally anti-nationalist. Indeed, I do once again consider myself Cornish, and I am proud of it, but in a much different way than before. For tradition is just like everything else. It has both evil and good elements to it. For example, there would be few who could argue that the tradition of Christmas is evil, considering how much magic and joy it brings year after year, especially to the children. My change of heart came from looking around at where I live, the beautiful and unique landscape of Cerno. In it, I began to see the story of its people contained, not just in the generations of Cornish men and women who farmed its lands, dug its ground and fished its seas, but back further to its ancient settlements, where Cornish would have been spoken freely, long, long before even a single word of English was ever uttered there. It was through this realisation, along with becoming a father, that I decided that there is something genuinely good to be carried forward from the past, that not every tradition is ignorant or outdated. For I was born in this land. I have lived and worked in this land for most of my life, and whether I liked it or not, I am part of its story. As such, I get to choose whether or not to carry forward its culture. I get to choose whether or not to pass that culture on to my children, so they can continue to do so. So let's have a look at that culture, the Cornish culture. Perhaps first and foremost, the Cornish culture produced both the pasty and the steam engine, two huge world-altering inventions. It is a culture that has strong connections with the legend of King Arthur, King of the Britons, not, as is often nowadays assumed, the English, via the castle at Tintagel, and it is a culture that has exported huge amounts of tin mining expertise across the globe, expertise that has undoubtedly altered the mining industries of the world. Unfortunately, though, it is also one which, much like other Celtic cultures, has had a long and bloody history of suppression under English enforcement. To read of the way in which the Cornish were treated in the past is appalling. The amount of brutal human suffering that occurred to the Cornish at the hands of the English is a tragic piece of history. It happened in much the same way as it did to others who opposed English dominance in its past. Yet I wonder if even back then every Cornishman hated every Englishman. I will never know, but having faith in humanity and knowing the kind-spirited persistence that is still found in the Cornish today, I find it unlikely to have been the case, as even in times of warfare that kind spirit can outshine the differences of nationalistic concepts. As a Cornishman, should I carry forward the grudges of the past into the future and dislike someone else because of what happened between our cultures so long ago? Absolutely not. It is the element of nationalism that brings nothing but negative outcomes with it. However, should I carry forward the good-natured spirit of the honest Cornishman with me into the future? I plan to do so. History happened, and it is very important to learn the facts of it. But that does not mean that you have to hate anyone because of what happened in the past. You have the responsibility to decide what your future will be. You have the responsibility to decide how the principles of your nation can change. It is a culture and language that I want to pass to my children, not for them to grow to hate others because of its history of conflict and suppression, but a culture and language that I want to pass down so it can grow into something new, exciting, positive, and prosperous. It is true that even to this day, there is a lot of pain, repression, resentment, and financial struggling here amongst the Cornish. But it is also true that there is a huge potential for the Cornish culture to grow into something new and magnificent. If you are Cornish and watching this, listening to or reading these words, the biggest thing you can do to improve our culture is to start learning our language, the Cornish language. It's something we should have been taught in school, but were not. I guarantee you it will improve your life as it has mine, and I am only just starting on this journey myself. It is the good-natured spirit of the Cornish that I witnessed in my grandparents, humble people who farmed this land. It is that spirit that I want to continue into the future. It is that piece of my identity that I want to pass down and also explore for myself. As such, I have constructed some simple personal principles. 1. I consider myself Cornish because I have a love for this land and the good nature of the people that dwell here, whether they be Cornish or otherwise. 2. I consider myself Cornish because I am learning to speak its ancient language, one that gives me an intimate connection to the Cornish people of its ancient past. 3. I consider myself Cornish because I want the Cornish culture to grow past the shackles of indifference, hate and total separatism into a brighter, progressive vision of a much richer culture. That is why I consider myself Cornish. Chrono-Cosmological.